We're joined by Mike Potts, the Bengals Director of College Scouting, for a two-part interview. Today, we talk about the way the Bengals free agency met up with the draft, Dax Hill and Cam Taylor-Britt.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Thanks for making us your first listen. And if you like what we're doing, hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button. We'll be delivered to your eyes and ears first thing when we upload every day. Today, we're joined by Bengals College Scouting Director Mike Potts. We're going to talk with him for 2 episodes about the Bengals draft. Today, we get into the way the Bengals free agency strategy interchanged and interacted with and either influenced or didn't influence their draft selections in the
Synergy,
2022
baby.
NFL draft. We also talk about Dax Hill for the first round pick and the trade-ups. Cam Taylor-Britt. Talked about a lot of great stuff with Mike Potts. Tomorrow we get into the rest of the draft, so make sure you stick around for part 2 as well. But without further ado, let's dive into part 1 with Mike Potts.
We're now joined by Mike Potts here on Locked On Bengals. And Mike, let's start with kind of the logic behind the draft, because I think the past 3 years, the off seasons, you look at it, and there's been a clear marriage between the offensive side and the defensive side. Now it flipped this year, where you add a bunch of offensive players in free agency and then address defense in the draft. But how did that work, especially this offseason? Because, heck, I know it. You guys went from, and you not necessarily, but the coaching staff went from the Super Bowl a couple weeks later at the Combine learning these players' names. And a few weeks later, they have to make these free agent decisions. So how did that work where you address at least the biggest weakness that we thought, offensive line and free agency, and then you circle back and address the defense in the draft?
Yeah, we definitely had some holes that we wanted to address there in free agency. It was pretty crazy with our coaches getting in the process, a lot later than normal, which obviously is a good problem to have. And then picking there at 31 in the draft, you don't, there's a wider array of prospects that you have to go through, to narrow it down, especially for those first couple picks. But, I don't think we went into the draft specifically thinking that we would just address, majority 5 out of 6 picks on the defensive side of the ball. I think that's just how the board really fell to us. And I don't really look at it as, at the end of the day, even after the draft, as an overall theme. I just think of it more individual pick by pick. And those guys were the guy that we thought was, when you weigh the, the value across the league, what our board said, and then also the position prioritization, in terms of holes that we wanted to fill and guys that we wanted to target. That's just the way our board fell. And those were the individual selections we made. And then we traded 2 of the 8 picks that we had going into the draft. So, that's 2 less chances, maybe to add to the offensive side of the ball. But I think when you put the whole offseason together as a complete picture, there's a pretty nice balance there, more offensive heavy in free agency and then more defensive heavy in the draft. But we're glad with the way it came out, and we're still looking to add talent, all the way up until the season starts.
Kind of the opposite, like James said, of the last few years. And watching the phone call going into the first round of the draft, watching the phone call after Zach Taylor hangs up talking to Dax Hill, telling him they've picked him, Andrew Johnson comes out of nowhere and gives the loudest, biggest handshake I think I've seen in my life, celebrating the selection of Dax Hill. He said Dax was his favorite player in the draft. So a couple questions just about the first round. What was it about Hill that Andrew Johnson loves so much and made him so excited for that pick? And did the first round go the way you anticipated it would, or was it a little bit less predictable than normal? Because to me, as an external observer, I felt like I had less of an idea of what was going to happen at the back of the first round than normal.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the first part of your question talking about our scouts, I mean, we give our scouts strong voices in the draft room, and we meet in December, we meet in February, and then we meet pretty much the whole month of April leading up to the draft. So we want scouts that have conviction. We want scouts that have passion for specific players that they would like us to target in the draft. And when a guy's put in the work on a player, evaluating him both as a player on tape, and then also talking to the sources at the school, in terms of figuring out who he is as a person, his character, how he's going to fit in our locker room, both from a personal character and a football character standpoint. And then you've got to evaluate the medical piece of it as well. So everybody knows we have a smaller scouting staff, and our scouts are a bigger piece of the puzzle than they are maybe at some other places. So that's what you want. And then, at the end of the day, it's not any one guy's selection. You like the primary or the area scout to have that type of conviction on a player. But what happens when we end up selecting a player on draft day, it's the result of a lot of different people touching that player from other scouts that cross-check the guy, and then the coaches as well, in terms of just developing that consensus on a player. If we had really high grades from the area scout and really low grades from others, and it was scattered all over the map, then it's probably not a guy that we would have as much conviction on, or consensus obviously on, to feel confident in pulling that guy off the board there in the first round especially. And then the other part of your question, it's funny, we went into this draft thinking it was really unpredictable. I think a lot of that stemmed from the lack of high-end quarterback talent, compared at least to some years. That's at least the way it was perceived, across the league, and, maybe publicly as well. Now, who knows? Some of these guys may greatly outplay their draft stock at that quarterback position. But we thought it was unpredictable going in, but then as specifically the first, second, and third rounds, our board was really just getting crushed in terms of guys flying off the board that we had, up in that first, second, third round, that we consider starter level grades from a personnel scouting standpoint. So it was funny. It actually turned out to be a little bit more predictable than we maybe thought it was going to be. But the first round was not necessarily as much as maybe the subsequent rounds after that. There was actually a number of guys that we felt comfortable with there at that pick at 31, and Dax was the guy that stood out, at the top of the list, as obviously he was our highest graded guy at that point, and we were thrilled that he was available. And that we go through a lot of different scenarios, and I think we thought it was somewhat doubtful that he would be there. So we were pretty happy to turn that name in and make him a Bengal.
We'll get back to our interview with Bengals Director of College Scouting, Mike Potts, here on Locked On Bengals. But I got to tell you about BlueNile.com, because Mother's Day is almost here. And that means, well, you got to get to BlueNile.com and take advantage of the offer you're going to hear only here on Locked On Bengals. You're going to get $50 off your order of $500 or more with promo code Locked On. So don't delay, don't hesitate, don't do anything like that. BlueNile.com has jewelry for special moments. And yeah, maybe you're looking for jewelry for mom, or maybe you're trying to get something for your wife because the anniversary is coming up. It doesn't matter. Locked On. You use that promo code at BlueNile.com. It's going to save you that money, $50 off, $500 or more. So make sure you check them out right now. BlueNile.com. Don't hesitate. You're talking about awesome jewelry that's going to fit anyone you're looking for. BlueNile.com, promo code Locked On. What's the feeling like leading up to that pick? Because drafting 31st overall, it's the latest in franchise history in the first round. And it's like, oh, Karlaftis is there and Wyatt's there, and all of us are speculating, and it's like, well, now he's gone. Now he's gone. Well, Dax Hill's still there. And when he finally makes it to you, was it just like, much like Johnson, where he's handshaking and everything was just like, all right, we got him. Was it as simple as that? Were you doing the math in your head when there are 4 guys left, but only 3 picks? So, 4 guys in this tier, and I'm speculating. I don't know your tiers or anything, but what is that process like? Because it's got to be pretty nerve-wracking. I know it would be nerve-wracking on my end.
Yeah, I'll tell you how we do it. It's probably maybe not as nerve-wracking as it may sound, because we really just let the board speak to us. So what we do going into each day of the draft is, in this case, we stack the board 1 to 31 regardless of position. And that's positions in need are incorporated into those decisions. The guy's character, the medical, the scheme fit. There's a lot of different factors other than just purely what the guy's grade is, and how the scouts and coaches evaluated him on tape. So we stack those guys and rank them 1 through 31. We even went all the way up to 63 with our second round pick, and then we have kind of like third, fourth round, and so on groupings by position. It's clusters of players that we would feel good about in those later rounds. So really, once we are going down, and okay, your first player off the board goes, your second player goes, your fifth player goes, whatever the case may be. It's just the highest ranked player, and then you get into scenarios where, hey, maybe if you're there, you see a fall off here at whatever it is, 15, 16 on that top 31. Maybe that's where you would consider a potential trade up, or maybe if really everybody in order is pretty much getting taken off the board, then and then there's one guy up there that's ranked higher, then that's where you would consider that. We liked Dax, and like I said, Dax being number one out of the group, but there was a couple other players as well that we would have felt good about there. And then just the way it was falling, we didn't feel the need to trade up. So like I said, it was probably a little bit less stressful in that first round than it was maybe in some of the later ones, but it always, there's always a little bit of stress and, anxiety, because it's out of your control to a certain extent, unless you give up picks, which we obviously ideally don't want to do, and move up and trade up a few selections or 10 plus selections, whatever the case may be, to get a guy. So that's kind of how we do it, and we just let the board kind of speak to us.
And you surprised us with 2 trade ups in the 2022 draft. Before we talk about those, one last question on Dax Hill, because Bengals Twitter, I got to tell you that the film grinders are telling me over and over, Dax Hill is not going to play outside corner. The versatility argument and the versatility strength is something we heard a lot about. Dax Hill lined up all over the place for Michigan. From a scouting perspective, you guys are projecting things a little bit differently than a coach might think about a player's fit. When you're looking at Daxton Hill from a scouting perspective, from a projection perspective, do you think he can play anywhere in the secondary?
I do think he can from a projection standpoint. I think there's 2 elements of the evaluation purely on tape. It's what you're actually seeing the guy do and evaluating him in that role, and then also projecting just his overall skill set to maybe do something that's outside of what he's asked to do in his college scheme. And some of that is talking to his coaches and just getting a feel for his overall football intelligence. The versatility that they think they could have put on his plate, but maybe he's, for whatever the reasons may be, he's more valuable in this spot. And yeah, he definitely played mostly that star nickel position in Michigan's defense, and then played some safety as well. Not a ton of snaps at outside corner, but if you are projecting him, with his length, his speed, his fluidity, he's got the physicality, he's got the ball skills. So there's not a whole lot in his physical skill set that would suggest that he can't make that transition. It's just a matter of our coaches getting their hands on him and getting him in here in our uniform and in our practices at OTAs and as well in training camp going forward into the season. And then, just seeing how rapidly that process and that transition could potentially accelerate. But he's a guy that we're gonna potentially asked to do multiple things and play multiple roles. But when you're projecting him, I think physically and mentally as well, from our evaluations, there's nothing that would say that he can't do that. It's just a matter of seeing him go out there and do it. And then, like I said, that'll be up to our coaches as far as how fast that process goes.
Mike, you mentioned the trade ups or potentially trading, and you traded up twice, which, yeah, we were not projecting. I don't think in any mock, any discussion, people ask about, potentially trading up in round 1. We certainly didn't predict 2 trade ups in the draft. And you traded up for Cam Taylor-Britt from 63 to 60, and then also in round 5 for Tycen Anderson. You mentioned also the stressful moments. Were those moments stressful, given that those guys you deemed were trading up for, and why was it so enticing to give up, picks to move up to get those 2?
Yeah, in the second round, not only was corner a position that we certainly wanted to address, we thought Cam Taylor-Britt, was one of the last guys that we felt great about. There's grades all over the board from different guys that evaluate, but in terms of the way he fit with us, scheme wise, as a player, his overall skill set, and then just bringing him in on a visit and interviewing him at the Senior Bowl, and obviously talking to his coaches at Nebraska and other staff members as well. Just the way he fit in personality wise. His toughness is something that really, you can see that the physicality he plays with on tape. You don't necessarily have to talk to his coaches or talk to him to kind of figure out, what type of competitor and the edge that he has. That's pretty evident. So, combined with the position that we wanted to prioritize, the way we felt about the person and the player, he just came out to be the guy that we really wanted to target. So to answer your question about the trade ups, there was a couple guys. Again, obviously Dax was our top guy on the board there in the first round, but we really got picked over. And I'd have to look back at what the exact numbers were, but we were something like eight or nine picks to go before our pick there that was supposed to be at 63. And we felt good. We maybe had a number of players. Again, I don't remember the exact number. It was maybe 4, 5, 6 players that we felt really good about at that point. And then guys just started flying off the board. And Cam Taylor-Britt was towards the top of that list. And he was just that one guy that was left there. There was a couple teams in front of us that, we thought could address the defensive back, corner or safety position. And then there's, obviously there was a ton of trades in this draft, so a team could trade up at any moment. So it just came down to, we felt like it wasn't worth the risk to let the other teams in front of us make the decision for us. And he's a guy that we targeted. We felt great about. We wanted to go up and get him. And that's what we did. So, I'm glad with the way it worked out. You can always look back and second guess it, but at the end of the day, we just thought the risk wasn't worth it because we could potentially be going down to a lower level of player, and potentially not address that position as well as we want to, in the defensive backfield, that we were lucky to come away with 3 guys, 3 DBs, out of our 6 picks. So, we're happy with the way it turned out. And then, it's a similar scenario with Tycen Anderson in the 5th round. He's a guy that, at least was in discussions for us in earlier rounds. And again, the board starts to get picked over, and he was just a guy that stood out on our board as being far and away our highest graded guy at that point. So, we found a trade partner with Chicago and gave up a 7th round pick and went up and got the guy that we think, has a lot of talent and potentially could be a starter in the future in this league. It's just, again, it's a matter of how quickly that comes to fruition. But we like him a lot. We like the character and the player with Tycen Anderson. So I'm glad we ended up getting both of those guys. And then obviously you don't like to give up those later round picks, but we are happy with a lot of the college free agents that we have agreed to terms with. We did have, later round draftable grades on. So some of those guys being guys that we would have considered and been in the discussion for some of those later picks that we used in the trade ups.
You'll hear more from Mike Potts in just a second, but first, a word from BetOnline, your one-stop shop for all things sports wagering, sports betting. Let's be honest here, the NBA playoffs, they're in full swing. My guy Steph Curry, well, he got Ja Moranted on Tuesday night. Can he get back in gear? Can the Warriors get back in gear, or will the Grizzlies shock the world and make the Western Conference Finals? You can wager on that. You can wager on the Suns in their quest for an NBA title. Are the Milwaukee Bucks just going to roll things with Giannis and company? You can wager on that and so much more. Maybe how many games the Reds are going to lose. Where are you going to go? So do all that. Where are you going to go? You're going to go to BetOnline right now. Don't delay. It is free to sign up. I've used them. You should too. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Talk about Cam Taylor-Britt a little bit. I watched a few of his games. I am an amateur scout and by no means claim to be an expert on scouting cornerbacks, but it looked like he really thrived with his eyes on the quarterback at Nebraska. Played a lot of half turn from what I saw. Didn't look like he played a ton of man, but certainly played some. Tested like an explosive athlete. Tested like he was a relatively smooth mover when you look at his traits and you look at the techniques he played at the Nebraska and the scheme fit, what stood out to you as maybe making him look like he would be a good transition to what Lou Anarumo would like to do with him in the NFL?
Yeah, we wanted to add speed and length to our secondary, and he's not the tallest guy in the world. I believe he's 5'10" and 5'8", but he's got really long arms for his height. He's got 31.5-inch arms. So we wanted to add speed and length, and I already touched on, the competitiveness and physicality,
Right.
just that edge that he plays with. There's some plays that stand out to me on tape just where a guy that wasn't as competitive and didn't play with the level of urgency that he does, maybe late in the plays, raking the ball out, just because he's straining. We like to call it in scouting. He's straining through the whistle and giving max effort. And the physicality he's going to bring in the run game and disrupting blocks out there on the perimeter, defending the screen game as well. I think he's going to be a great scheme fit for us. Like you said, he's really explosive. He can run. He's got solid ball skills. So, there's not a whole lot, just in his skill set to knock him on. And then, a lot has been mentioned about the versatility of this class as well. He's a guy that played safety early in his career. So he brings that to the table also. But, I think he's a guy that'll start at outside corner for us. And then we'll see how much more we can put on his plate as we go. But, he's a guy that's really talented, and we're really glad that we came away with him, again, being a guy that we targeted going into it.
We'll continue part 2 with Mike Potts. We're going to get into the third round and day 3 of the NFL draft. We're going to talk about the Bengals wide receiver situation and so much more. Mike was great with his time and gave us a lot of fantastic insights. Really appreciated that, just like last year. And some of these recurring features are some of my favorite things to do here on the Locked On Bengals podcast. So make sure you tune back in tomorrow for part 2 with Mike Potts. Until then, Bengals fans, Hoo day, and have a good one.